Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, February the 13th, 2019. It's 4 p.m. in New York, 1 p.m. in Los Angeles, 9 p.m. in London. Sydney, Australia, is at 8 o'clock in the morning. But wherever you are in the world, thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And I'm pleased and proud to welcome back Cindie Chavez, who I don't get to talk to 3 days a week like I used to, or 3 times a week, but I get to talk to her once a week, so that's good. How you doing, Cindie?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Yeah, it's nice to you have a nice cheeriness in your voice today that tells me that some of the issues you were dealing with are moving aside. So I'm glad to hear that. It's nice. I mean, you're always a cheery person, but you're especially cheery today. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'm glad it shows. It's a good day over here for sure.
It is. Yeah, I can tell. So good. And we're going to be talking about Neville today. This is Neville Day. It's also the day before Valentine's Day. So if anyone has questions that they want to address about relationships, Cindie is definitely the person to ask. She's a relationship coach, among other things, and she'll be glad to help answer your questions. I might even throw in an opinion or two myself. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you were chatting with me before the podcast, Cindie, about how you tend to get a lot of questions this time of year. And I was wondering, is there anything particular that you're getting a lot of this year, something that's like the theme this year of the questions that you're getting?
No, I've got several sessions lined up with people who are in relationships or have just gotten out of a relationship and want their ex back.
Ah,
That's
yes.
all. That's always something that's not just Valentine's Day. That's all the time.
Yeah.
People, people, that's one of the reasons why I got into relationship coaching. Is sounds crazy, but the ability to help people heal a broken heart.
Mm,
For some reason, that's one of the abilities I have. And my logical brain always would try to talk me out of that
really?
and give me a million reasons why you don't want to deal with this. Why do you want to deal with this? Why do you want to talk to people who have a broken heart all the time? Like, you're a certified business coach, you could do that, right? Or
This is
you're really
true.
good at reading tarot cards, you could do that, right? It's like, and I do those things, but I remember really struggling with it because people that have a broken heart, I mean, that's really painful, and it's it's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
hard to witness sometimes. And then I remember one day I was standing outside. It was a beautiful sunny day, and I was just one of those days I was just feeling fantastic, and I was full of gratitude for my relationship and my life. And suddenly it hit me that everything good that I had all kind of flowed out of me having my own broken heart. And I realized that everything we want is sort of on the other side of our broken heart. And so what could be more noble and more satisfying than helping people heal up from having a broken heart? So I got okay with it that day.
Okay.
Stop resisting fighting against that so much, and being more willing to help people that were in that situation. So
Well, and that is certainly a way you can be very helpful because, like you said, that is very, very painful to go through something like that,
it
particularly if it's
is.
one of the first times that you've ever had to do it. It's just excruciating. And it it's one of those things where you really do want to have somebody to explain to you what's going on because if you don't know yourself, you're like thrashing around trying to find some way to feel better, and you can't find it, and that makes it even more horrible.
It, it it really does. I mean, at least for me, from my own experience, and it's kind of funny because um, logically I know it's not true, but when
Hmm.
my own heart felt broken, it just didn't feel like it would ever heal. It didn't feel like there was ever going to be any other good feeling spot. It's just like, this is it. This is terrible. And logically, I knew that wasn't true. It's like, well, of course this is going to get better, but it didn't feel like it. So,
It does. It does get better over time. Even if you don't know what to do, it does get better. That is the good news. But it's certainly better if there's a way to get there quicker, which there is. I mean, if you
yes,
understand what's going on psychologically and emotionally, then there are ways to get there quicker. Um,
yes. As a
And
matter of
I've
fact,
often
I wrote
wondered.
a book about it. It's called Healing for a Broken Heart. And
Uh-huh.
it's full of practical ways to help move that forward. So yes.
Yeah, yeah. And they can find that, I presume, at the usual places, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, so forth.
It's at Amazon. You can get the Kindle version at Amazon where it's formatted for Kindle
Oh, okay, good.
for like, I don't know, a dollar or two. It's not
Uh-huh.
expensive. Or you can get it for free on my website, but it's not formatted for Kindle. It's a PDF file. So
Right, right. Yeah.
however you want to find it.
Good. That's good. Yeah. I remember what I went through the very first time I experienced that, and I look back at it and I asked myself if I had been challenged by somebody to try to do some of the things that you need to do, how would I have reacted? Would I have said, yes, let's go, let's do it? Or would I have realized what I was really about to embark upon and say, gulp? I don't know what I would have done.
I don't know. What I see is that, especially, and I can talk to this audience about this, people that are practicing or learning how to practice law of attraction. A lot of times we want to take roads like this because it feels easier.
Hmm.
Like I know people who, were interested in practicing magic because they thought that'd be easier. That'd be the easy answer. Magic.
Hmm.
Woo, snap your fingers. But
Right?
they didn't realize how much time and effort it took to really develop a magical practice. And I think it's the same thing of law of attraction, right? It's like, no, there is some focus that has to happen and some time and some energy and some learning and some practice that has to happen. But the thing I think also is that any kind of magical working we're trying to do, it's always supported better. It always works better if we also use some mundane practices with it. It's like, yes, I can say a prayer or a magic spell or do some law of attraction methods to get a new job, but it's going to work better if I go out and put some job applications out there and tell a few people, hey, I'm looking for a job, and do some practical things. And I think it's the same with healing a broken heart, is that you said it will get better. Like even if you didn't do anything,
Right.
over time you'll
Yeah.
realize the pain is lessened. But there are some practical things that we can do to facilitate that healing that are actually just really practice. Like I don't think it would have been a challenge, some of the things that I could have told you would help if you were feeling brokenhearted.
Hmm.
Like don't spend so much time alone when you're feeling like this, right? Connect with people,
Yeah.
or make sure you're taking good care of you're getting enough sleep. Those are kind of easy practical things. They might not be easy, they're simple.
Right, right, right.
Right? But when you have someone, it's sort of like a checklist. When you get a checklist of here are the things you need to do for any given situation, just practical things. When my kids were still living at home and they had chores, if you opened up my bathroom cabinet, there was a checklist in there for how to clean the bathroom,
Right, okay.
right?
Okay.
And well, whoever had that job, there was the checklist. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, easy. I don't forget about anything. Practical.
Yeah.
So I think it's like that. But when you're the one with the cold or the flu or the broken heart or out of work or whatever it is, sometimes it's really hard to conjure up that checklist in your own mind and remember
Hmm.
the things you need to be doing. And so to
Right.
have someone else say, look, here are a list of things you can do that will move along this process, I just think it's helpful.
I think you're right. I definitely think you're right. Um, Also, I'm sure I must have asked you about this at some point because I've known this is part of your gig for quite some time now, but I don't remember what the answer is. So I'm going to ask again, and there may be
Okay.
listeners who are wondering as well. Magic. You talk about how you can practice magic, how is something you have to learn to do. It's not something that is just snap your fingers and you're done, which kind of sounds like being a deliberate creator. But
Right.
when you use magic, when you teach magic and so forth, what are we talking about? What exactly are you doing?
That's a great question. Well, first, I guess the best place to start is at my own personal definition of magic, because we hear that word a lot, and there are a bazillion kinds of magic to practice. There's ceremonial magic and chaos magic and um, and of course I'm losing my stream of all the different ones that I know of.
Of
But
course.
right, there's Tibetan magic, and there's black magic, and there's lots and lots and lots of different streams and paths. When I talk about magic, I talk about taking something from the metaphysical realm, which is that realm of hopes, dreams, wishes, ideas, brainstorms, thoughts. Because right, it's like when we see a cartoon, and above the little cartoon person's head is a little cloud shape with something in there, right? We know it's nebulous. It's still in the metaphysical realm. It's a thought or an idea, a hope, a dream, a wish. When we use a method to bring that thing from the metaphysical realm into the physical realm, where it is a physical manifestation and magic has a hallmark of being easy and delightful, or appearing with ease and delight, or at least that's the magic I like to practice. That's what I call magic. There's sometimes an element of surprise, an element of delight, hopefully an element of ease, not too much struggle. And we have manifested something from a thought, a hope, a wish, a dream, a vision into physical reality. I have a very eclectic practice that encompasses Buddhist magic, chaos magic. I delve into astrology. I read tarot, divination that way. So I have a lot of different things woven into my practice. Jewish magic. And so, but I think that everyone chooses their own path that feels right for them. Law of attraction is part of my toolkit as well, of course, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on what's comfortable for someone to use.
So it's really anything that results in a manifestation that is a physical manifestation coming from the non-physical or from the metaphysical.
Yeah, and if you look at it that way, then getting up and walking across the room is magic.
This is true. And it really is. I mean, let's be perfectly honest. When we think about it in terms of, well, I do that every day, then it doesn't seem like magic. But when you look at it in terms of all the things that have to happen in order for you to do that, you have to have the skeletal structure to do that. You have to have the muscular structure. That muscular structure has to operate in coordination with the skeletal structure. It has to use the balance mechanism of your body. Your body actually has to get up and motorize across the room. All these things have to happen, all being driven by cells that are all connected together, working through a single neuro system. How can that not be magic? I
Right?
mean, that's incredible.
And here's the really interesting thing is none of us know how we do it.
Yeah, right.
Like even with your very in-depth and great expression of it that you just gave right there, that example with all we still don't know how.
Right.
We know what's happening.
Yep.
That's magic in my book.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I send a signal through my brain into the body and get up and walk, and it starts to walk. But beyond that, I don't really have a clue how that works. One of the things that still blows my mind is how long it takes for an electrical signal to pass through the neural system from my brain to, say, my foot. It could be like 3.5 to 4.5, 5 seconds. And yet, when I want to walk, I can do it instantly. Well, how the hell is that possible?
How is it possible? It's a miracle.
I
Really,
don't
it's a miracle, right? And that's one of the things that I say to people who are in a lot of pain, or maybe
Mm,
people who have just gotten a diagnosis that's not good or doesn't
mm,
feel good from a doctor, right? They get a medical test back. Let's put it this way, somebody that's gotten bad news
right, right.
in any area. And I like to remind us that miracles happen every day.
Hmm.
And
Every
when
day,
you,
every second.
well, that's what's so great about the explanation that you just gave, expressing it that way, just talking about getting up and walking
Yeah,
is a miracle. And
it is.
was it Einstein that said there are two ways to view the universe? We can look at it as though miracles don't happen, or look at it as though everything's a miracle. And I like that
That could
idea
be.
because, yeah, especially when you're talking about law of attraction. and manifestation and making things happen, allowing things to happen.
It kind of reminds me of the comment that Niels Bohr made. Niels Bohr was the first created the first model of the atom, and was also one of the early philosophical pioneers of quantum physics. And the comment he made was, if you think you understand quantum physics, you really don't understand it, which I thought was brilliant because I mean, I have some understanding of it. I don't have the understanding that a quantum physicist has, but even the limited amount of understanding I have tells me the thing is darn mind-blowing. One of the things that Einstein included in his, I can't remember which theory, if it was the general theory of relativity or the special theory of relativity. I always confuse the two. But one of them, he specifies that there is no such thing as empty space. All space must have energy in it. And
Right.
it may not be energy we can detect, but it has to, theoretically, it has to be there. And as time has gone on, more and more of his theory has proven to be true. So I believe that part is true also. Well, if that's true, if there's energy in everything, I mean, I was bringing that to mind in relation to something somebody had posted about how there's all these Wi-Fi signals passing through our bodies and creating all these medical conditions and so forth. And my reply was, I don't know if you realize this, but there's energy of all kinds passing through your body. In fact, your body is made up of all this energy, and it's going on
Right.
all the time. The people who want you to be afraid of that are the people who want you to believe that there was no energy there before until that Wi-Fi signal went through your body. But that's not the case. It's
Yeah.
there all the time.
Energy. Well, Niels Bohr actually, one of his quotes is one of my favorites. Um, and I used it one time in a situation where I was handed a microphone in a group of like 5,000 people and asked what makes someone an expert.
Ooh,
And what came to mind was Niels Bohr's idea of an expert is someone who has made every possible mistake in a narrow field.
that's nice. I like that. Yeah.
So
That's good.
whenever I'm asked what makes me an expert in relationships,
Hmm.
that's where I go.
That's good.
Someone
I like
who's
it.
made every possible mistake in a narrow field. That's how you get
Actually,
expert status.
well, it makes me wonder, because I've often wondered, is it possible for me to run out of mistakes? So maybe I never actually become an expert because I still have all the mistakes yet to be made.
Right, but that's why the field has to be narrow, see?
That's
So then
yeah.
you can
Oh,
go on and
okay.
start making mistakes in another field,
Oh,
right?
okay. Oh, well, that's fun. So anyway, today is Neville Day, and we are in
Yes.
the middle of discussing the very first book that Neville put out. It's actually our fifth, I think. I can't remember how many we've done. I think it's our fifth one. But Your Faith is Your Fortune, and we're on chapter 8. We kind of zoomed through chapter 7 after finishing chapter 6 last week. But it was a worthwhile zoom because it was, I mean, he didn't really, I'm almost not sure what chapter 7's purpose was because there weren't any really new ideas in there. It was almost like he was just kind of rephrasing his stuff in a different way. I mean, do you have a sense about that?
Well, one of the things I notice about Neville is that, well, two things, and we'll talk about the second one uh, right before the chapter. But one of the things I notice about Neville is that he does he does repeat himself pretty often,
He does,
and
yes.
he reiterates. But the thing is I think that's really useful because the more you hear it, or at least the more I hear it, uh, the easier I start to flow in his thought process and start understanding what he's saying. So sometimes I will read something that Neville says, hmm, but maybe like the third or fourth time I read it, it may be said in just a slightly different way, and suddenly it's like I get it. It's like
Hmm.
this kind of abstract thinking. It's like, oh, okay, I know what he's saying here. So I think the repetition is good because many of his ideas aren't ideas we come across very often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
and but I think repetition in teaching is always good. So the other thing is that he will, when he comes upon, he uses scripture a lot. We talk about this every time, every week, every day that we talk about Neville or we read from Neville. We always make all of these disclaimers.
Right.
And I think they're really important because I always picture somebody just coming across the podcast and listening. And here we are, we're quoting all these scriptures from the Christian Bible and having them think, huh, like Cindie and Walt are teaching the Bible now. But really, first of all, it's not us, and it's not our beliefs necessarily. It's not what we've come up with. It's Neville. It's his belief or his teachings. And he has always a very esoteric definition of whatever scripture that he's throwing out there. So it's really important to keep going back and remembering that you may have heard this verse as a child in Sunday school, or maybe you go to church and you've heard it there, or maybe you read the New Testament or the Christian Bible. Maybe you read that book yourself and you've heard it there, and you might have read this verse 100 times, and Neville is not saying what anyone else has said about it. It's completely different, and I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah.
The other reason why that's important to remember is because when we hear things that we've heard over and over, a lot of times they just sort of go right by us,
Oh yeah. We
right?
discount
Or we assume that we know what they mean, and we're like,
it.
yeah. But with Neville, it's important to recognize that he is meaning something completely different. And I'm sure as soon as we dive in here to chapter 8, we're going to come across it, because
Oh yeah.
he leads off with a bunch of verses from the Christian Bible. So
Of course. Yes.
I'm going to just preface it right from the beginning, and people that are listening every week know this already, but when Neville uses the word God, he defines the word God as your imagination or your consciousness. So if Neville talks to me about God, he's talking about my consciousness or my imagination. It's important to keep in mind.
And there's an interesting side thing that goes with that, because somebody posted on one of the groups today on Facebook the question about, I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but the gist of it was this: which comes first, the consciousness or the imagination? And I was taking the position that the consciousness comes first, because you have to have a conscious being that does the imagining. But but it's an interesting question when we look at Neville, because Neville kind of treats them as being equivalent, and they aren't really exactly the same thing.
Well, and if we went back to maybe even the book prior to this one, where Neville was doing a lot of describing of the subconscious and the conscious,
Mm-hmm.
and how the subconscious was creating, but then he said, this is really just one thing. I'm dividing it and making it sound like two because it's easier to describe to you the function.
Right.
But your consciousness is your consciousness. So I would agree with you. Consciousness came first, and that the consciousness has created the imagination, which now feeds the consciousness. But, at the same time, it's probably here or there whether we realize which came first, because it's a theoretical question, and none of this works in theory.
This
It
is
just
true.
works in practice.
Yeah.
So I don't like to get into theory too much, because I think it can be a stumbling block to send us over to a place where we're trying to figure out how something works, when, instead of figuring out how the car works, just get in and drive.
Drive the car. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm in favor of that, because I know in my own life I have been particularly focused on practicing hardening things into reality by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, playing out that little vignette. I've been really working on that with some stuff that's been
Yes.
kind of tough for me. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what today's latest set of lessons are, because I want to learn this better. I know the
All right.
basic, I know the general, but I want to learn it better.
Well, here's what's interesting. The chapter title is No Other God. And
Hmm.
when I hear that, he leads off with this verse, I am the first, I am the last, and besides me is no God. And of course, immediately I think of a deity who is all powerful and who is telling a group of people that I'm the only one, don't worship anyone but me. See,
Hmm.
so that's my predisposed, learning about that verse.
Most people
But
are,
if
I
I
think.
say, okay, but Neville says that God, when he talked about God, he's talking about the human's consciousness and the human imagination. I think, okay, well, then that changes the complete meaning of this. So I need to look at it new. So he says, I am the first, I am the last, and besides me is no God. I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Thou shalt have none other gods before me. Thou shalt have no other God beside me. As long as man entertains a belief in a power apart from himself, so long will he rob himself of the being that he is. Every belief in powers apart from himself, whether for good or evil, will become the mold of the graven image worshipped.
This is
The
a key
belief,
point right here, by the way. Before you go to the next part there, that's a really
uh-huh,
key thing. And I
it
say that
is.
because um, the idea of a belief being a power apart from oneself, that has a very definite set of assumptions, I guess, if you will, that go along with that for me anyway, because so often, especially in law of attraction circles, we talk about how you want to leave it to the universe to deliver the best possible result for you. And that does sound like putting the power outside of yourself, saying, no, no, it's not me, it's out there. It's out there
Mm-hmm.
delivering to me. And there are Neville advocates who will jump all over you for saying, oh, no, no, no. This is all inside you. Don't create a duality that you don't have to create. What do you think?
Well, another thing I think is interesting that that passage brings up too is, that he says every belief in powers apart from himself, whether for good or evil, will become the mold of the graven image worshipped. And how many times do we have a belief that's connected to a how
Hmm.
that has to do with a power apart from ourselves, right? If
Yeah.
the company calls me back, if the bank gives me the loan,
Hmm.
if this guy is really interested in me, right?
Hmm.
All these powers that we are putting apart from ourselves. And then we start, he uses graven image worship. Then we start worshiping that thing, or we start depending on that thing. We start thinking that all of these outside forces are what really hold the power to whether
Hmm.
I have a job or whether I have an income or whether I have a love life or whether I have all these things apart from ourselves. We
And I've
start
done that.
suddenly
We've
getting
all done
very
that.
tangled up with that, right? And
Yeah.
I think it it's a really great description of how that can happen, is that every time we give the power away, then we start focusing. We could use the word focus instead of worship, but we start putting our focus on that thing, on the how. And then we lose focus because suddenly we're caught up in looking at the how instead of looking at whatever it is.
And yet, and I can see that I do this. I suspect that virtually everybody listening to this podcast says, yeah, I can see how I do this.
Yeah,
But
we all can see how we do this, right?
yeah, but by the same token, it's also it's kind of a tricky thing because the way all of our language is structured, the way our logical thinking processes are structured, are all about working with this outside world. And the moment you're talking outside world is the moment that you're tossing the power out there. How on earth do you think about this stuff as being an internal world and deal with an outside world? That's the root of the struggle right there, I think.
Well, I think that we have to remember, because yes, we do have an outside world.
Yeah.
And there is the company and the guy and the bank and I mean, all those things actually really do exist.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I really get where I will stand up and speak out against, like victim shaming that goes on in LOA circles, because, it's a lot more complicated than we sometimes want to think it is. We are connected. We are all one, which means that everybody's energy is affecting everyone else.
Hmm.
However, it's a belief that when the belief gets tipped to where I don't have any power or control, and all of the power lies with the something outside of me, that's when we get into victim energy and we feel helpless and
Absolutely.
hopeless.
Yeah.
And so what I believe is there's a place to balance that. There's a place to recognize that I can take radical responsibility for my experience. That doesn't mean I'm to blame, but it does mean that I'll step up and figure out how to figure it out, right? And and so I do have power within me, and I do get to make the decisions. No, I mean nobody can really make those decisions but me. And
True.
then and then I deal with how I'm going to deal with those powers that are outside of me. It's not that now Neville may argue because Neville's saying there really isn't any other power.
And
It's only a belief, right?
that's the core paradox here, and I'm hoping he's going to address that paradox in greater detail. So, having interrupted you, let me let you get back to reading and explaining this stuff to us.
Well, look where he goes next. He says the beliefs in the potency of drugs to heal, diets to strengthen, monies to secure, are the values or money changers that must be thrown out of the power. He can then unfailingly manifest that quality. This understanding throws out the money changer's temple. Ye are the temple of the living God. And what agreement hath the temple of gods with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God, as God has said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people, a temple made without hands. It is written, my house shall be called of all nations a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. The thieves who rob you are your own false beliefs. It's your belief in a thing, not the thing itself, that aids you. There's only one power. Now that sounds like a placebo to me. There's only one power. I am He. Because of your belief in external things, you think power into them by transferring the power that you are to the external thing.
That's an interesting
Realize,
comment you made. That's a really interesting comment you made about it being a placebo. Talk about that for a second. Why do you see that as a placebo?
well, he says it's your belief in a thing, not the thing itself.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one power. I am He. So there's only one power, your consciousness. Because of your belief in external things, and I love this, what he says here, you think power into them by transferring the power that you are to the external thing. Realize you yourself are the power you have mistakenly given to outer conditions. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I said to me that seems like a placebo, I remember when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and it was bad. It was stage 4 cancer, and it was in several places in her body. And I remember the doctor saying to us, the mind is the most powerful part. Her mind is the most
Wow.
powerful part of her. And he was saying it in the context of us asking about some alternative treatments that we knew had been effective and whether he would, be willing. And then us also saying that we didn't want her taking certain drugs and things. And he said, apart from all these things, apart from chemotherapy and apart from all these alternative treatments and what works and what doesn't, her mind is the most powerful part here. So when I read this, it's like Neville is saying, you think that external thing has the power to heal you, but you have the power to heal you. And you're transferring your power over into that thing. And that's what I hear.
I'm
Neville,
really impressed by that doctor that you guys had. I don't think I've ever heard a doctor say that, an actual medical doctor that I was consulting or Louise was consulting. I am just impressed.
yeah,
Really impressed.
it was really pretty great because we felt the same way, and that's what we believed, and it was great to hear him say it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think Neville is saying here. It's your belief in a thing, not the thing itself. I
Okay.
like the idea. I like that he says that we can think our power into something by transferring our own power into that thing. Now, not that I want to give away my power, but just having it explained that way, that it's possible for me to transfer my power. It's giving away your power. And it's really interesting the way he puts it. He says, realize that you yourself are the power you've mistakenly given to outer conditions. The Bible compares the opinionated man to the camel who could not go through the needle's eye. The needle's eye referred to was a small gate in the walls of Jerusalem, which was so narrow that a camel could not go through it until relieved of its pack. The rich man, that is, the one burdened with false human concepts, cannot enter the kingdom of heaven until relieved of his burden, any more than could the camel go through the small gate. Man feels so secure in his man-made laws, opinions, and beliefs that he invests them with an authority that they do not possess.
Mm.
Any thoughts on that last sentence? Man feels so secure in his man-made laws, opinions, and beliefs that he invests them with an authority they do not possess.
Well, a few thoughts actually. One thought that comes to my mind is that's precisely what man is trying to do with anything political, because that's what those are, laws, particularly man-made laws, and the opinions and beliefs. Well, opinions and beliefs can cover a lot of things, but I kind of associate it with the first part, the man-made laws. And indeed, we think about political leaders as being authorities. That's exactly what we call them.
Mm-hmm.
And here he's saying that we invest them with an authority that they do not possess, which is that it's not only Neville-ish, it's very Abrahamic for him to say that, and it's one that I resonate with very well. The idea of giving an authority to somebody that really is not theirs, that they really cannot possess. Well, it does a couple things. First of all, it explains why it is politics never works, because we try to treat them like they have the authority, but they really don't. It also brings to mind what the root of the word authority is. The root is author, as in to write, as to be the person who is expressing from an expert position what it is that they're expressing, whatever it is. So having the authority is investing someone with an authority is basically giving someone else the expertise. And you think about it that way, when you express it that way, you realize you can't give anybody expertise. There's no way to do that. There's no way to accomplish that. So the moment that you try to do that is the moment you are really disempowering yourself.
And if you're talking about your own experience and your own life, why would you want to allow someone else to be the author of it?
Yeah, well, that too. Yes.
Right?
Well, we do it all the time.
Yeah, we do it
we
all
do
the
that
time.
regularly.
We do it all the time. And we think about how we, as a matter of fact, I just talked to someone, and that was one of the things they mentioned, is they were really worried about what other people were going to say about a choice they made. They were worried about, they really wanted to make a particular choice, but they were worried about what people were going to say. They were worried about what people were going to think. They were worried about getting some blowback over it. People,
Right.
Family members saying this was the wrong choice. And I think, wow, that right there is that authority that we give to all these other voices of people telling us that they don't approve of what. And I'm telling you, that's probably the worst thing we can ever do, is to seek approval.
I agree with you. By the way,
So,
Jamie is listening in, and she's raised an excellent question.
oh,
And I think it's
throw
one
it
that
out there. I want to know.
I think we need to address this one. She says, how would you reconcile this idea that there is no power outside of myself with Abraham Hicks's concept of source energy?
Well, you are source energy.
Yes.
Source energy is you. I mean, that's it.
Yes.
That's how I reconcile it.
But it's an excellent question, because that's precisely how most people treat source energy, as something out there.
Yeah.
And we do that because, as much as we like to think of ourselves as being a part of source energy, I think most of us think of ourselves as being separate.
Well, it's separate the way separate drops of water make up the ocean, though, right?
Yeah.
I love that metaphor because it's really clear. It's like, we get into these conversations when we talk about religion, when we talk about any kind of spiritual practice. People will ask, well, are there spirits? Are there deities? Are there entities? Look at Hinduism. There are thousands of deities.
Right.
Right? And I only personally know a couple of them, but there are thousands, and there are saints, and then there are powers, do they really exist? I believe that they do, but I also believe that we're all one. And I also believe that it's all in my head.
Yes.
Right? Everything's all in our head.
Or in our
Everything,
hearts, depending on how you want
every,
to look at it.
everything is all in our imagination. I mean,
Yeah.
everything we're experiencing, we think our eyes are seeing, but it's really our brain processing,
Hmm.
right?
It's true. It's true. It
And
is.
so
I think it's the concept that we constantly trip up on. It makes sense when you express it abstractly, but trying to kind of come to terms with it in day-to-day experience, that's where it gets a little tricky. The concept is simple. We are all, like you say, drops of water. We are individual, but we are part of the larger whole. We are both at the same time. And when we talk about source energy, we're talking about us, and we're also talking about our connections with the rest of us. It's both, all at the same time.
it's
We're so
tricky for
used to
us.
differentiating.
It's tricky for us to understand because we are limited by our senses.
Hmm.
I mean, we have five senses. That's not a big, very big number.
It's true. One for each
We might
finger.
have, we might have six, right? Six senses.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
Still, we're limited as human beings. We have some limitations. So I think
Hmm.
that's, you know, I think that explains a lot of that. Um, Great
It also,
question, though.
but it also clarifies what it is that we're really dealing with here. Why do we spend so much time on this law of attraction thing? It's so simple. That which is like unto itself is drawn. Like attracts like. That's such a simple concept. And yet we spend so much time on it. I think we're touching on exactly why we do. Because it's not so easy to understand it in the context of who we really are, because I don't think we're really clear about who we really are. I mean, you and I are expressing it pretty clearly here, but I think most of the time, I don't think we're clear about this. I don't think we're clear
Yeah,
about we're all part of this one source energy. This is us. We are it.
yeah. No, that's true. And I think that, this idea, like the chapter, no other God, and you have Neville saying, you know, that you're it, right? There's no other power outside of you. And that's like, wow, seriously? That's a pretty big thought. But I also think that it's personal. So for me and my life and my experience, I'm I'm the one that has the power to decide how I experience. No one else does. But I don't have the power to decide how anyone else experiences their life. So for them, they are the one. You are the one. And
Hmm.
somehow then to complicate it, we're all connected together.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Just to make things more interesting. Now, Jamie also added a second follow-up to what she said. So Abraham Hicks is a state of consciousness like Neville's concept of Christ and the disciples. So Abraham's, Hicks, Source, Neville are all me pushed out.
I would say that. Yeah, for you.
I would even say it's a little bit it's a little bit more than that. I think there's a lot of truth in the way she phrased that. And it's a nice way of expressing it. But
Yeah,
I think it's also all of that is within.
yeah.
I mean, there really is no out and in. We treat we really do treat out and in because that makes sense to us. So you talked about the five senses. It in and out makes sense to us. This I feel like this is outside. I feel like there's something inside.
It's the
But
same
really,
way
there's
that it's the same way that we get mind boggled when we hear that time isn't linear.
mm-hmm.
But like, but wait a minute. I know this thing happened in the past. I know this other thing that's going to happen tomorrow hasn't happened yet. No,
I, I,
actually, everything's happened at once. But
I
I
can see
can't
my
fathom
stopwatch. My stopwatch is going. There is a second. There's another second. I can see it. There it is, right there.
that. It's not linear, it's circular, right?
It's circular.
Okay, so I believe we're going to be able to finish this chapter, which is like a miracle, right?
For us, it is.
Yeah, that's what I mean. For us. So Neville says man feels so secure in his man-made laws, opinions, and beliefs that he invests them with an authority they do not possess. Satisfied that his knowledge is all, he remains unaware that all outward appearances are but states of mind externalized, which is exactly what Jamie just said.
That's right. Yes.
When he realizes that the consciousness of a quality externalizes that quality without the aid of any other or many values and establishes the one true value, his own consciousness. So he's saying here that when we realize that our consciousness of a quality will actually bring that quality into manifestation and that it doesn't take anything else, just the consciousness, then that establishes the value of our consciousness when we start recognizing that.
Yep.
He goes on to quote a portion of the Jewish Bible, the Lord is in his holy temple. He made reference a few sentences back about the body being the temple. So I think he's talking about consciousness again. And the consciousness that inhabits our body, right? The Lord in the temple. He says consciousness dwells within that which it is conscious of being. I am is the Lord and man, his temple. Okay, I am is the Lord. I will put the comma there. And man, his temple. I'm editing Neville now.
Yeah.
Knowing that consciousness objectifies itself, man must forgive all men for being that which they are. He must realize that all are expressing, without the aid of another, that which they are conscious of being. Peter, the enlightened or disciplined man, knew that a change of consciousness would produce a change of expression. Instead of sympathizing with the beggars of life at the temple gate, he declared, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have, the consciousness of freedom, give I unto thee. Stir up the gift within you. Stop begging. Claim yourself to be that which you decide to be. Do this, and you too will jump from your crippled world into the world of freedom, singing praises to the Lord, I am. Far greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world." This is the cry of everyone who finds his awareness of being to be God. Your recognition of this fact will automatically cleanse the temple, your consciousness, of the thieves and robbers, restoring to you that dominion over things which you lost the moment you forgot the command, "Thou shalt have no other God beside me." So Neville makes that verse very literal.
Yes.
Saying you shouldn't have any other God besides yourself. That may be a really hard pill to swallow for someone that practices a traditional religion. So always remember to go with what resonates for you. That's how I feel about it. I don't have a problem with anything Neville says, but that's me. And I've, walked a long, twisty road in my practice. So I always want to make sure that people aren't too freaked out by Neville because, a lot of what he says and the way he defines certain verses would definitely be considered heresy, if not blasphemy. So.
Well, you were just in the process of making all those mistakes so you become the expert. That's really what it was. But because that's what you were referring to earlier, right? You're the expert's the one who's made all the mistakes.
Yeah, I say that jokingly when in reality, I really don't think there are mistakes in life. I don't think there are mistakes. I like the idea that there are no mistakes, just human experience. And so, looking back, I don't think I'd really change anything. Because everything that we go through creates whatever we are now, and contrast is a really valuable part of the human experience. So yeah,
I understand what you're talking about. To me, the word mistake is very similar to Neville's idea of the word sin, just missing the mark.
Yes, it's the same word. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So when I think of a mistake, it's like, oops, oh well, I just didn't hit the target on the bullseye this time.
Right, just try again.
Yeah.
Go again. Just go. You get a do-over. What do they call it in golf? A mulligan? Right.
A mulligan. Mulligans. Unlimited mulligans here, folks.
Right. Do it again. Just try again.
This last paragraph, it reminded me of a few things. First of all, a phrasing he uses a lot, and a lot of it, he, like you said, he draws from scripture. You talked about how somebody from a traditional religion could have trouble with this. My reaction was, I think anybody, regardless of their religion, can have trouble with this. This is not easy stuff. But
Yeah.
you look at phrases like, where is it? Do this, and you too will jump from your crippled world into the world of freedom, singing praises to the Lord I am. Except, of course, that the Lord is you, so you're singing praises to yourself.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we're starting to touch on what for some people feels like narcissism. It feels like,
Well,
oh, this is just self-love. This is like, oh, this is somebody who's totally blind to everything else, and so, a horrible person.
I have a different take on that, that might not be quite as narcissistic, and that is singing praises, recognizing and singing praises to the miracle of who we are, to
Hmm.
the miracle of what my imagination can do, to the miracle of my consciousness and how powerful it is. In the same way that when you really think about, you scratch your hand and the next day you see it healing up, and 2 days later it's completely healed. To me, that always seems like such a miracle, like our bodies heal themselves. So instead of being singing praises to me, like, aren't I awesome when I get a scratch, it heals itself. Well,
Yeah, right.
most people have that same experience. It's not that I'm special, it's that we all have this miraculous capability. And I look at it that way. Stop begging, claim yourself to be that which you decide to be. Do this, and you too will jump from your crippled world into the world of freedom, singing praises to the ability of your consciousness. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's how I read that.
That's a good way to read it. When I read the same thing, the way I read it was, okay, I'm going to redo the phrase here. Do this, and you too will jump from your crippled world into the world of freedom, singing praises to the Lord I am, which I translate to celebrating to myself, I did it. I did it.
Right.
I actually did
Yes.
it. Which doesn't seem all that narcissistic to me. It seems more like, oh my God, I finally got to the top of this mountain. How did I do that?
Right. It's like you finally hit the home run. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, I just knocked it out of the park. Right. It's just a
It's going,
celebration.
look, it's going over the fence. It's really doing it.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I remember the first time too playing Little League Baseball where I did hit a home run, and I sat there I couldn't even run. I just stood there at the plate watching like, oh my God, it actually went over the fence.
That's awesome, because my first story, when I was, I guess, 7 or 8, I was painfully shy. I didn't play sports. And I got up to bat and swung and missed, and finally got a hit, which was probably more like a bunt, but not intentional. But the bat connected, so I actually got a hit, and I
Yeah.
ran to third base. And
I love it.
so that was it for me. That is my baseball career.
But it really does that experience that you just described exemplifies what happens because when we first hit the home run, when we first achieve this thing we've been going after, even if it's just getting the base hit, we're just stunned. We lose all sense of direction. We lose all sense of where third base is and first base is and where we're supposed to go. It's like, but I did it. I actually
Right.
stop the game for a second here. I actually did it.
It reminds me of last week. Somebody asked a question about, how come so many times we manifest something and then we lose it,
Yeah.
or we manifest something and then something terrible happens. And our
Mhm.
conversation went to, well, because there's more to just outer manifestation. Like, your inner self has to be ready to be the person that has that thing. And if you're not ready, if you just did the outer, work to manifest something, and there was no inner work to be the owner of that thing, whatever it is, and that it reminds me of that. It's like I connected the bat to the ball, but I wasn't quite ready to go anywhere else.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. There's almost like a shock value that's involved. And
Yeah,
by the way, Jamie was
definitely
asking
was.
which chapter this is. Jamie, this is chapter 8 from Your
8.
Faith is Your Fortune. It's entitled No Other God. It's a very short chapter, but as usual, we can spend hours on it because we find all kinds of layers of information in this stuff. I know that this chapter, I mean, I talked earlier about how I'm trying to really learn this hardening thing, trying to really
Right.
learn this focus and this vignette creation and this, assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled and all that kind of thing. Really, really, really learn it. And this chapter is addressing exactly what I needed to hear. We all do this, but I had gotten into the habit in the last couple days or so of treating the power as if it was outside of me. It's so easy to do that. I mean,
And
talk about the mistake. That's the mistake. It's a simple mistake, but I made the mistake of assuming that I'm not the one who has the power. And the moment that I assume that is the moment when I start feeling that lack end of the stick, because now I can't have the thing end anymore.
because now it depends on that outward thing, the outside thing. But
Exactly.
here's what I love about this chapter. Probably my favorite part of this chapter is dealing with that right there. And it's that he says, because of your belief in external things, you think power into them by
Mm,
transferring the power that you are to the external thing. I love that because that reminds me when I'm in that place where that you just mentioned, where suddenly you realize, oh my gosh, I'm giving my power away to this thing out here. It's that recognition. It's not just that I'm putting the power over there, but it's that I'm transferring
right.
power that I am to that thing. And I can call that power back. I mean, I can reclaim that power. I don't have to leave it out there. I can call it back to me.
Now, for me, the question becomes, why do I not just why do I keep giving the power away? I think I know the answer to that one. But how do I stop myself from giving the power away? Like the next
Awareness.
try, how do I do it? How do I keep myself from doing that? What
It's
was that?
awareness. It's awareness.
Hmm.
It's mindfulness. It's it's sort of like any other habit we try to break, where where in the beginning, like if we're trying to break the habit of something verbal, something we keep saying, at first, we're always going to recognize it after we say it.
Hmm.
Maybe a half an hour after we said it. Like,
Right.
oh, I think I said that again. Then we'll start catching ourselves mid sentence, right? And we start catching it. Like maybe somebody that goes around saying, oh, I'm terrible at remembering names. I never remember names. I never, and then
Yes.
they say, I'm not going to tell that story anymore. So then they say to somebody, what did you say your name was again? I never remember names. And then after it comes out of their mouth, oh, I did it again. But then after a week of catching themselves afterwards, they say, what was your name again? I'm trying to get better at remembering names, right? They catch themselves in the middle of the sentence, but then pretty soon they'll remember before they say it.
Hmm.
That's when the habit's starting to be broken. And so it's the same way. You're talking about having an awareness right now.
Right.
And you mentioned it earlier, and I think you're absolutely spot on. It's built into our language. And language is everything, and words are powerful. So it's built into our language. So it's hard to break, but you're already in the spot where you're aware of it. And so it's the awareness of it that will break it, and you'll stop giving the power away.
Yeah.
We all can do that. Yay!
Yeah. Oh, thank goodness. I mean, even now as we're saying this, I know that there's still a little disconnect going on in my head, but there's the logical side that's saying, "Oh yeah, of course we can do this. We got this down pat, no problem."
It
Meanwhile, the
has
other
to
part
start
of me is saying,
there.
"Oh, we're not so sure yet," but the logical
That's
side
where
is
it
saying, "Yeah, yeah,
starts.
yeah, we got this. We got to do this. We can do this. It's ours. We got it."
We got the power.
We do. Yeah. And that power is ours at all times. As much as we can hold on to that memory, to that recognition, that's how much we succeed in life with everything that we want to succeed at. It's the moment that we give that away, that's the moment that everything starts to fall apart, which is really something.
Yeah.
Oh, well, as usual, you wore me out with another chapter of Neville, but it's a good one. I tell you, this is really, really good. This is good stuff. I think this is going to be one of those times where after we're done and we have our little chat afterward, even though I have to kind of rush because Louisa and I are going out to dinner with a friend tonight, I'm going to take like an extra 5 minutes just to read through and remind myself of this. Because
Yeah,
this is it. This is the root and the core of everything we try to learn right here.
it
This
is.
is it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
Good stuff. Well, thank you, Cindie. As usual, your wonderful translation abilities and your amazing Neville decoder ring have come to the rescue once again.
Well, I'm
Before we
happy to
leave,
be here.
if somebody wants to get another look at your Neville decoder ring and find out more about your services, how do they reach you?
They can find me online, cindiechavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ.com. There's a contact form there, and anything you need, just give me a shout. Say hello. I'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. Cindie, as usual, it's a pleasure. My only regret is I only get to talk to you once a week now, but hey, at least I get to talk to you once a week. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you a week from today.
I'll be back.
All right, I will as well. We hope you'll join us as well next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.